All right, so we finally made it to the point where we're thinking about algebraic structure. We understand how things are put together. We get the story of the variable, as we like to say. And we're now going to construct the story so that we can deconstruct the story and actually solve an equation. So for example, over here, I have a pretty messy equation, relatively speaking. And we're going to solve this equation. And the way we're going to solve this equation is we're first going to construct the story of the variable b, in this case. We've got a variable b this time. And then once the story is constructed, we're going to deconstruct that story so that we can solve for b and find out what place is that variable holding so that all of this computational stuff produces a -2 as a result. So first of all, the story. Hey, as I write the story, and you can do this too, I'm going to kind of use shorthand language. Rather than write out all the words, we're now going to come to a place where we're going to shorthand it. Here's what I mean. So, the story of B. We start with B. So we're going to start with B. Now in this equation, what happens to B first? The first thing that happens to B is it gets tripled. It gets multiplied by 3. So I'm just going to say multiply by 3. Shorthand way of multiplication here using the x, meaning multiply not the variable x, the multiply symbol x. What's the next thing that happens to B? After being multiplied by 3, that result, that product, gets divided by 2. So the next thing is product gets divided by 2. I hope you see the little shorthand there rather than write out all the words, and I hope you get the context here, you get the gist of it. The product of 3 times b is divided by 2. What's the next thing that happens to b? It gets tripled, it gets divided by 2. The next thing is this addition of 4. So this quotient is added by 4. Now we're just going to keep telling this story of b. After adding by 4, that whole result, there's those parentheses. The parentheses for us in math are just sort of a, hey everybody, we want to take all of this and multiply by 2. If I didn't put parentheses around that, then the implication would be only the quotient gets multiplied by 2. But the parentheses communicate to us that you want to take the sum first. You want to add 4 first, then take that sum and multiply it by 2. So the next thing is this sum, this addition of 4, that sum is multiplied by 2. Oh, we're getting close. Up there in that numerator, after all of that, after the triple, divide by 2, add 4, double, the next thing is subtract 4. So this product, this multiplying here, 2 times all of this product is subtracted by 4. And then finally, all of that. Notice up here, after the subtraction, there's a difference. There's a difference of all of this stuff minus the 4. This difference is divided by 7. After all of that computation, apparently, for the correct value of b, the result will be -2. All right, that's the story of x. It's a long story. I hope you didn't fall asleep. Now we're going to reverse the story so that we can deconstruct. That is, if this is how the construction happened, we should be able to deconstruct and get back to b and find out what value must b be holding in order to have all of that computation come out to be -2. I'm going to do that deconstruct over here so that you can see how it works. All right, so here's the equation again. Notice it's the same equation that we started with over here on the other side. It's not, I'm not trying to trick you. It's the same equation. We're just now going to go through the deconstruction process to see what happens. All right, the result is -2. Yes, it is. Now, right before we got the result of -2, we took a difference and divided by 7. So the deconstruct is going to be that we want to now multiply. Let me do the shorthand. we now want to multiply by 7. Now if we multiply this thing by 7, what are we going to get? Well, instead of having a result of -2, multiplying by 7 is going to give me a -14. And now remember, all of this was divided by 7. So if you multiply by 7, what you're going to get is all that stuff. Now let's just stop for here for a minute and see if you can track what I'm saying here. So we're going to work our way back. So our first thing was to divide, our last thing over here was to divide by 7. Our first thing over here is going to be to multiply by 7. But why? You got a bunch of stuff up here. Now pretend I just boxed this in with a different color here. You have all this stuff up here. And all that stuff in red has been divided by 7, is what it says. And if you take all that stuff in red and divide by 7, the answer is -2. So the thinking is, what do you divide by 7 and get -2? Well, to find out what you divide by 7 to get -2, you multiply by 7 and find out, -14. Doesn't it make sense that -14, all this stuff in red, which is right here again, all this stuff in red divided by 7, if all that stuff in red is -14, -14 divided by 7 is -2. So I'm just now making a logical claim that all this stuff in red up here must be -14, so that -14 divided by 7 is -2. Now, we're thinking of it that way, but we're also getting some help over here from our construction story. To deconstruct divide by 7, we're going to multiply by 7. All right, the next thing. Over here, we subtracted 4. So over here, we're going to add 4. So what happens if we add 4? -14, add 4. If you need a calculator, please always don't get bogged down in the computations if that's something you're not fluent in yet. But if you add 4 to -14, you get -10. Now we're adding 4. So if you add 4 over here, you're going to get this. Because over here, you're subtracting 4 from some stuff. So if you add 4 to that, it's going to undo it. Now again, let's think here. You grab another color. What I'm really saying is this stuff in blue, if you subtract 4, is going to produce -14. So all that stuff in blue must be equal to something. What must all that stuff in blue be equal to so that when you subtract 4 you get -14? Well, all that stuff in blue must be -10 because -10 minus 4 is -14. Check it if you need to. -10 minus 4 is going to be -14. So again, I'm just kind of making a logic statement here that if you got a bunch of stuff, subtract 4 to produce -14. All that stuff in blue has to be -10. I'm getting a little help because I had to subtract 4 in the construction, so now I'm going to add 4 in the deconstruction. Let's keep going. Times 2. Now in the construction story, we multiplied by 2, therefore in the deconstruction story, we're going to divide by 2. Now if you divide by 2, you're going to get -5. -10 divided by 2, -5. If you divide by 2 over here, now that's just the opposite of multiplying by 2, so 3b divided by 2 plus 4. Excuse me. Now again, let's just think this through. Grab one more color. What we're really saying is this stuff in green is something. That something, when multiplied by 2, produces -10. What number, what quantity would you multiply by 2 and get -10? That quantity must be -5 because -5 times 2 is -10. So I'm just making a logic claim that this stuff in green has to be -5 because that's the only way you can get -5 times 2 to get -10. Now there's a logic statement there. I hope you kind of see as I'm going through this. There's these logical things, these claims that I'm making as I go through my list. But I'm also getting some help over here from my construction story. Over here, I multiplied by 2, so now I'm going to divide by 2. What's next? Add 4. Let's just add 4 here. So now I'm going to subtract 4. If you subtract 4, you're going to get negative 9. Negative 5 minus 4, negative 9. Over here, if you subtract 4, 3b divided by 2. Let's go back to red. So what I'm saying is, there's some stuff here that when you add 4, you get negative 5. To what quantity would you add 4 and get negative 5? I'm saying it's negative 9. I'm saying this stuff in red must be negative 9, because negative 9 plus 4 is going to give you negative 5. Check your calculator on that if you need to. So I'm making claims. I'm trying to think about these quantities. What quantity do you add 4 and get negative 5? But I'm also getting some help over here because the construction story told me to add 4, so now I'm going to subtract 4. 2 more steps. Divide by 2, so now I'm going to multiply by 2. I just realized that I failed to keep track of all my steps here, but I've been saying them. I should have been writing them. Maybe afterwards I'll go back and write them all in. All right, over here we divide by 2. Now we're going to multiply by 2. If we multiply by 2, we're going to get negative 18. Negative 9 times 2 is negative 18. If you multiply by 2 over here, we're just going to get 3b. Now again, let's just think through this from a logic perspective and see if you're tracking with it. What we're saying is there's some quantity here in blue that when you divide by 2, you get negative 9. Well, what would that quantity need to be? What would that 3b need to be so that when you divide by 2, you get negative 9? Well, isn't it true that negative 18 divided by 2 would be negative 9? So I'm just making a logic statement that that 3b has to be negative 18 because negative 18 divided by 2 is negative 9. Now I am getting some help on how to do that because right here I divided by 2, so now I'm going to multiply by 2 to figure out what that would be. Finally, multiply by 3, so now we're going to divide by 3. So if we divide by 3, negative 18 divided by 3 is negative 6. And if we divide by 3, we should get right back to start with b. Start with b. b is negative 6. Now, let me grab one more color. 3 times something is negative 18. What would that something be? Well, 3 times negative 6. So this b must be negative 6 because if b is negative 6, 3 times negative 6 is negative 18. And so now I have the value of b that satisfies this equation. If b is negative 6, now let's just do a quick check. If b is negative 6, let's start with b. b is negative 6. Multiply by 3. Negative 6 times 3, negative 18. Divide by 2. Negative 18 divided by 2, negative 9. Add 4. Negative 9 plus 4, negative 5. Times 2. Negative 5 times 2, negative 10. I just messed up. Let me try that again. b was negative 6. Let me keep track so I don't mess up. Multiply by 3 would give me negative 18. Divide by 2 would give me negative 9. Add 4 would give me negative 5. Multiply by 2 would give me negative 10. Subtract 4 would give me negative 14. Divide by 7 would give me negative 2. So if this b right here is negative 6, and you do all the stuff, the result certainly is negative 2. We solve the equation. Now, like I said, I could have, and failed to, but I could have kind of figured out over here what are all these steps that I was saying. Let me just record them quick as a summary. So remember back here we divided by 7, so over here we're going to multiply by 7. Here we subtracted 4, so here I added 4. Negative 14 plus 4, adding 4 over here to figure out what that quantity had to be. Back here I multiplied by 2, so over here I divided by 2. Remember the negative 10 divided by 2 was negative 5. Over here I added 4, so now I'm going to subtract 4. Remember negative 5, subtract 4, takes you to negative 9. Over here I divided by 2, so over here I multiplied by 2. Negative 9 times 2 is going to give you the negative 18. And over here we multiplied by 3, so over here we're going to divide by 3, and negative 18 divided by 3, there's your negative 6. So if you need to, go back through this, pause, stop, think, make sure you're tracking with all of my steps. Let's see if you can make the connection between how this story of B was constructed, and therefore when we deconstruct, we can see the solution of B equals negative 6. And if you're thinking about the structure by thinking about what has to be here in red, what has to be here in blue, what has to be here in green, what has to be here in red, what has to be here in blue, what has to be here in green, as you think about whittling that thing down like we did, you will see a very productive and useful way to think about solving equations.